Developing right now on Morning News Now, an 11th hour deal extending the temporary truce between Israel and Hamas just hours after the release of more Israeli hostages, including one American.
This process is producing results. It's important, and we hope that it can continue.
We have team coverage with the latest, including new fears that the violence is spreading beyond Gaza. Plus, he was a powerful man with a complicated legacy. This morning, America is remembering Henry Kissinger, the former Secretary of State, now dead at the age of 100. A look back at his decades of influence on U.S. policy. And it's looking like an early winter wonderland in parts of the U.S. this morning. We are tracking a storm system bringing a mix of snow and rain to several states. And jingle bells aren't the only thing ringing these days. That's right, 'tis the season to get engaged. But the way people are popping the question is changing. We will look at the trends that are going against tradition. Interesting one, actually.
I know. I didn't even know that was changing.
Yeah, it didn't change for me, but I like hearing about some of this stuff, so it's kind of cool.
We'll get into that. Good morning, good to have you with us on this Thursday. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. We're going to begin our show in the Middle East, where a last-minute deal to extend the truce between Israel and Hamas by an extra day came into effect this morning.
The deal was struck at the 11th hour overnight. It comes after Hamas freed an additional 16 Israeli and foreign hostages, including an American with dual citizenship, while Israel released 30 Palestinian prisoners. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in Israel this morning on a diplomatic mission. He says efforts are ongoing to extend that deal for a longer stretch. The extension also gives more breathing room to Palestinians living in Gaza and allows for more aid to reach the devastated enclave. Speaking yesterday, the UN Secretary General said that while he welcomed the agreement, it was not enough to support the needs of Gaza's suffering population.
The level of aid to Palestinians in Gaza remains completely inadequate to meet the huge needs of more than 2 million people. The people of Gaza are in the midst of an epic humanitarian catastrophe before the eyes of the world. We must not look away. We believe we need a true humanitarian ceasefire.
In a few moments, we'll hear from the host of Oh My World on YouTube, former NSC director for Syria and Lebanon, Hagar Shamali. But before that, let's get to NBC's chief foreign correspondent, Richard Engel, for the latest in Tel Aviv. Richard?
The truce between Hamas and Israel is now entering a very difficult phase and could be breaking down. There had been an expectation last night and this morning that there would be an extension, potentially a 2-day extension, perhaps more than that. But in the 11th hour, Israel and Hamas only agreed to a 1-day extension. So today is the last day of the truce between the two sides. Another hostage release is expected to come today. But this almost broke down overnight. Hamas initially put forward a list saying it was going to release 7 hostages and then hand over the body of 3 of the hostages who were killed, it says, by Israeli airstrikes. Israel rejected that. And now when you talk to Israeli officials and when you speak to Hamas, and Hamas is telling its people to be ready for the military campaign to begin, it does feel that tension is resuming and we could be once again going into a military phase of this conflict where Israel renews its campaign against the Gaza Strip to destroy and dislodge Hamas from power. There will be costs if Israel does resume its campaign. Costs for Gaza, obviously, where the health ministry, which is run by Hamas, says that around 15,000 people have already been killed, and costs for Israel. Public relations cost. Israel has faced an enormous international backlash because of its military campaign against Gaza, because of all the civilians that have been killed, and a backlash within the country because if it begins this military campaign, it could slow down or even stop the hostage exchange program, the hostage releases being swapped for Palestinian prisoners. But Israel wants to keep pressure on Hamas, and it is not satisfied with the pace of the releases so far, not satisfied with Hamas's answers about how many hostages it has, how many are alive, how many are actually in Hamas's custody. So we will see what happens. Secretary Blinken is here trying to encourage dialogue, trying to extend the truce, trying to convince Israel that if it does resume its military campaign, to carry it out in a more targeted way.
All right, Richard, thank you for your reporting.
For more, let's bring in Hagar Shamali. She's the host of Oh My World on YouTube and a former spokesperson for the U.S. mission to the UN and former NSC director for Syria and Lebanon. Hagar, good morning. Always great to have you with us. So I want to start with what Richard had just said there at the end of this idea of being more targeted. A U.S. official told Politico, that's what viewers are seeing right now on their screen, that the U.S. and Israel have been talking behind the scenes for weeks about these future operations, what Israel's going to do coming up in the south of Gaza. That's, of course, where many civilians have now evacuated to. The U.S. is pressuring Israel to be surgical and targeted, as you can see here, to prevent civilian casualties when possible. How much influence does the U.S. have over Israel's tactics in the region if and when combat operations restart?
Well, John Kirby actually on Tuesday added that the U.S. has told Israel that they do not support Israel moving into the south just yet until it can account for all Palestinians, all internally displaced Palestinians, and he said that Israel was receptive to that. And it doesn't surprise me because the consultations that go between the United States and Israel are very close at all times, let alone during a conflict. It's going to be even more close. And so if there's anybody that can influence Israel's decision making, and it's not always going to happen, but if anybody can do it, it is the United States. And it doesn't surprise me that for the last few weeks, the U.S. is trying to press them to be as targeted and surgical as possible, because what they're trying to say is, listen, we support your goal in defeating Hamas. It is important for your security, it's important for the world's security, and it's important for a two-state solution. However, it doesn't help for Israel's broader security to have such a high civilian death toll. And I think what the U.S. is saying, what the Biden administration is saying is, listen, we can make this happen. We can work this, but it needs to be a war that is more targeted, more patient, more surgical, as they said, and I believe that it's achievable.
There are also growing concerns this morning about escalating violence in the Israeli-occupied West Bank. That's where the UN says more than 200 Palestinians have been killed in recent weeks. Secretary of State Blinken expected to visit the occupied West Bank. He's likely going to meet with Palestinian leader Abbas. What's at stake here? How important is that meeting?
Well, this kind of goes back to the point that you were making earlier about the truce and how fragile it is, because you have to take these things day by day, even hour by hour. And that would be the case with any war. Truces and negotiations and hostage swaps or hostage prisoner swaps would be sensitive and tenuous in any war. But when you're dealing with a terrorist organization, it's a whole other level. And so when you've got violence coming up in the West Bank, you had a terrorist attack in Jerusalem this morning. These things make it very difficult because you need a partner on the Palestinian side to ensure that the day after Gaza there's going to be somebody there to pick up the trash, that there's going to be someone there who can help control and the land and prevent future terrorist attacks. And Mahmoud Abbas is a very weak, very corrupt leader, but he is the only chance that we have right now. He is the leader of the Palestinian Authority, and the Palestinian Authority is the one that represents officially the Palestinian people. And in this case, we need him to work and to cooperate, and he has cooperated with the Israeli government before many times. He says he's willing to take control over Gaza when the war ends. And again, while he's not loved by everybody, I think he's the only chance we have until they come up with somebody new.
Hagar, so the truce right now between Israel and Hamas is expected to continue through at least today. But then what do you think happens next? I mean, obviously, we've seen each day means more hostages are released. Do you think another deal will be made in order to get Hamas to release more hostages?
Well, so they're going to take this day by day and get as many hostages as they can released. But unfortunately, I believe that once they hit the group of hostages who are all male and soldier, this is where things are going to get difficult. And I hope I'm wrong about this, but the fact is that history has shown that Hamas, when they've had male Israeli soldiers, one the most famous, Gilad Shalit, they held on to him for 6 years, and then he was traded for 1,000 Palestinian prisoners. You've already heard Hamas leaders saying that they would be willing to release all of those leaders in exchange for all of the Palestinian prisoners, which is just not going to happen. And so that's where things are going to get difficult, and that's kind of why I expect the war to continue, in part because of the hostages, and in part because Israel says it wants to defeat Hamas, and in order to do that, it needs to go to the south of Gaza.
Hagar Shamali, as always, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
This morning, Japan is asking the U.S. military to temporarily ground the Osprey aircraft following yesterday's fatal crash. Crews are continuing to search the waters off the southern coast of Japan, looking for wreckage and trying to figure out what happened. NBC News Pentagon correspondent Courtney Cuby has the latest details.
On Wednesday, another deadly crash of a U.S. military Osprey. In this case, it was a U.S. Air Force One, a CV-22, off the southern coast of Japan. The airmen on board were part of a routine training mission that turned deadly. A U.S. Air Force Osprey crashed into the waters off Japan's southern coast with 8 U.S. airmen on board. U.S. military officials say the remains of one have been found and that search and rescue efforts continue. The airmen assigned to the 353rd Special Operations Wing at Kadena Air Base in Japan were on a training mission when Japanese officials say the Osprey disappeared around 2:40 p.m. local time. The Osprey is unique, capable of taking off and hovering like a helicopter, then tilting its rotors forward to fly like a plane. But it's an aircraft with a troubled history. In August 2022, Air Force Special Operations Command grounded all 52 of its Ospreys for more than 2 weeks after clutches repeatedly malfunctioned. And deadly crashes with Marine Corps Ospreys as well, including 4 Marines killed when their Osprey crashed during an exercise in Norway last year, 5 more Marines killed just 3 months later in Southern California. And this August, a Marine Corps Osprey went down in Australia, killing 3 Marines on board, including Norm Lewis's son, Major Toby Lewis.
Well, I'm concerned about any pilot, military pilot, and flying and the things they have to do.
He says Toby loved flying the Osprey.
I don't know the cause of Toby's crash, and I do not know the cause of this crash, and I think the military will figure that out, and they'll decide whether these airframes are still safe to fly or not, or they'll correct the problem.
Boeing and Bell, who build the Osprey, say they are standing by to provide any requested investigation support. Defense officials tell NBC News search and rescue efforts could continue for the next 72 hours. Meanwhile, U.S. military officials continue to notify the next of kin of those who were on board that Osprey aircraft, telling them that their loved ones are missing. Back to you, Courtney. Thank you so much.
On Capitol Hill, a vote is expected as soon as Friday on whether to expel embattled New York Congressman George Santos from the House of Representatives.
Yeah, an ethics committee report earlier this month found that Santos had violated federal law and misused campaign funds. He has denied any wrongdoing. Well, Santos would be only the 6th member of the House to be expelled ever, and the 3rd since the Civil War. House Speaker Mike Johnson says he's concerned, though, ahead of the vote.
What we've said as the leadership team is we're going to allow people to vote their conscience. I think it's the only appropriate thing we can do. I trust that people will make that decision thoughtfully and in good faith. I personally have real reservations about doing this. I'm concerned about a precedent that may be set for that. So where everybody's working through that.
For the latest, we're joined now by Axios senior political reporter Eugene Scott. Eugene, good to have you with us this morning. So Santos says he expects to be kicked out of Congress, though Speaker Johnson, as we heard there, does have some reservations, some concerns about the expulsion vote. What is Johnson worried about?
Well, this will set a precedent. I mean, we know we're in hyper-partisan times, and lots of people in Congress, even within parties, do not like one another or want to work with one another. And coming to the conclusion that someone should not be in Congress, despite not being convicted of a crime yet, this is a first-time scenario that these lawmakers find themselves in. And Johnson thinks this won't be the last if this moves forward.
We know, as we mentioned as we were heading into this piece right here, that only a handful of House members ever have been removed from office. And that's to say nothing of how many scandals there have been in Congress, and lawmakers have sort of survived those, not been expelled. Why is it difficult to get the votes needed for expulsion? What are some of the challenges that come with that?
Well, one of the challenges right now is we're in an incredibly tight Congress, right? Republicans only have a slight advantage. Kevin McCarthy was saved quite a few times because of George Santos. Mike Johnson could very well find himself in a similar situation and is looking at these numbers. And individuals have relationships with these folks that they, want to keep intact and know could ultimately harm them in the future if they do something like this, like ending a political career. And so there's a lot of back scratching that happens on Capitol Hill, and setting off a scenario like this could make things difficult for the future of these individuals as they pursue their political careers long term.
As you mentioned, Eugene, it is a tight Congress. If Santos is removed, then what are the next steps taken to fill his congressional seat here in New York? And do we know who might be in the running for that?
Sure. Well, the governor of New York has to call a special election, which has to happen in about 70 to 80 days. At least 7 Democrats and 9 Republicans have already expressed interest in Santos' seat, including some state lawmakers, a former the Democrat who used to hold it before Santos had it. And so we could see even more names coming up. But this will happen really soon. And there's a lot of interest in this seat because Democrats want to win it back. Republicans want to keep it.
It is a competitive district. All right, yeah. Eugene Scott, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, grab your rain boots. We are expecting some wet weather across the country from the southern plains to the Pacific Northwest.
Meteorologist Michelle Grossman is with us this morning with a look at the forecast. Michelle, good morning.
Good morning, guys. Great to see you. And yeah, we have a couple spots that are going to see some wet weather. We have some snow, we have some storms, and some really heavy rain expected in spots. First, we'll start out west, the Pacific Northwest. An atmospheric river event is setting up once again. We've had these week after week, and that's going to bring a lot of rain on shore, especially along the coast. Higher elevation snow. We could see 1 to 2 feet in the highest mountains. And then the Four Corners, we're watching the chance for rain, a mixture, and also snow. Once again, going to see 1 to 2 feet in the higher elevations of the mountains of the Four Corners. But we are watching the southern plains. This is going to be the big weather story throughout the day. We have an area of low pressure. It's pulling moisture off the Gulf. We're also kind of interacting that cooler air with warmer air. And we're looking at the chance for some strong storms as we head throughout the afternoon hours. We've already had severe thunderstorm warnings in portions of southeastern Texas. And that's what we're going to see as we go throughout the afternoon hours. 7 million people at risk. We could see a few tornadoes, damaging hail 1 inch or greater. Also winds gusting up to 60 miles per hour, especially where you see this orange shading, but not ruling out where it's yellow too. So Lufkin, Livingston, Bryan, also Beaumont, Houston, you're going to be in the mix for some really strong storms, or the likelihood of that, and also the chance of localized flooding. We could see 2.5 inches per hour when that rain is coming down. So in terms of the rainfall, we're looking at hourly rates of 1 to 2 inches, possibly up to 2.5. That's really fast. It's blinding rain. So we could see some localized flooding, and we're looking at a whole lot of rain, especially along the coast here, because that's pulling that moisture off the Gulf. So where you see the reds, the oranges, the yellows, even into portions of Arkansas, the Tennessee Valley, the lower Mississippi Valley, we're going to see the chance for some heavy rain, and that's going to continue as we head throughout tomorrow. As a result, we are concerned for the chance for flash flooding. The greatest risk would be right around the coast here, Lake Charles to Houston, where you see that darker blue, but could see localized flash flooding to Lufkin, Alexandria, also Shreveport. So this is going to be a big story as we go throughout the afternoon, evening hours, and one that we're going to watch very closely. Here's the setup. An area of low pressure bringing that Gulf moisture into the Mississippi Valley, the southern plains, that severe risk in addition to heavy, heavy downpours. And then as we go throughout tomorrow, that area of low pressure is going to move off to the north and east. It's sort of going to lose its own, still have the chance for some strong storms along the Gulf Coast, but not that severe threat that we're seeing today. Rain will reach the northeast and mid-Atlantic, but not enough to kind of ease that drought. But still, we're going to see kind of a dreary day on Friday. Out to the west, we're looking at some snow alerts from the Pacific Northwest into the Four Corners. We have winter storm warnings, winter storm watches, also winter weather advisories, and that's due to that atmospheric river in addition to an area of low pressure in the Four Corners. And as we kind of put radar over this, we're seeing that rain already falling, and we're going to see a couple inches along the coast there, especially in Washington, Oregon, into Northern California. But then it's going to move inland as we head throughout the next couple of days. And look at all those bright colors. That means we're looking at heavy rain for Portland, into Eugene, into portions of Northern California as well. But the rain's also going to move inland as we go throughout tomorrow. Heavy snowfall, 1 to 2 feet in lots of spots in the higher elevations. And that's where you see the pinks and purples. The setup here, we have that area of low pressure, that atmospheric river kind of moving onshore. That's going to bring strong winds, some rain, wind, and mountain snow. So we have a lot going on. The East Coast is quiet today, but we're going to bring the rain into the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic tomorrow.
Skiers are happy, I think.
So happy, right? We're piling it up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right.
In some of those perfect places. Sun Valley, Boise. Awesome. All right. Thanks, Michelle.
Sure.
Well, this morning we are remembering former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, who in his time was one of the most powerful and influential men in global affairs. affairs, but his legacy is very much open to debate.
He served presidents of both parties, overseeing international diplomacy during the Vietnam conflict and playing a key role in the normalization of relations with China. He died Wednesday at 100 years old. NBC Nightly News anchor Lester Holt has more on his life and the work of this controversial figure in American diplomacy.
Thank you. Nice to see you all.
He was brilliant, ambitious, controversial, and one of the most influential secretaries of state in American history.
I think we made further progress.
Henry Kissinger served Richard Nixon, Gerald Ford, and was consulted by presidents of both parties on international issues throughout his life.
Henry Kissinger has been a friend of mine.
Nixon made him a national figure, and together they reimagined U.S. foreign policy, détente with the Soviet Union, relations with China, shuttle diplomacy in the Middle East. Kissinger helped shape Nixon's policy in Vietnam and negotiated an end to the war, famously declaring success prematurely, just days before the 1972 election.
We believe that peace is at hand.
He was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize.
Nothing that has happened to me in public life has moved me more than this award.
Though his co-recipient, North Vietnam's Le Duc Tho, declined the honor. 4 years later, President Ford awarded him the Medal of Freedom. He was a master of pragmatic, big-picture diplomacy, but he had his critics, who described him as manipulative and insecure. Some called him a war criminal for his role in bombing Cambodia and widening the war in Vietnam. Born in Germany in 1923, Kissinger's Jewish family fled to America as Hitler rose to power. He became a U.S. citizen, served in World War II, and earned a Ph.D. at Harvard, where he became a professor. He caught the eye of Richard Nixon, who made him National Security Advisor, then Secretary of State, the only person ever to hold both jobs simultaneously.
There is no country in the world where it is conceivable that a man of my origins could be standing here next to the President of the United States.
But their relationship was complicated, and White House tapes reveal that Kissinger sometimes enabled the worst in Nixon.
It was a very curious relationship because we were not personally very close.
The night before he resigned in disgrace, Nixon asked Kissinger to kneel and pray with him.
And of course, it was a crushing event. But I think of that evening as an experience with dignity, and it was very moving.
Kissinger was no faceless bureaucrat. He was a world-renowned celebrity.
I loved your foreign accent.
And he loved the spotlight. He was even something of a pop culture icon. After leaving government, he opened his own consulting firm, remaining active and sought after for decades. At 95, eulogizing John McCain's life, Kissinger sounded a wistful note about his own.
Like most people of my age, I feel a longing for what is lost and cannot be restored.
Henry Kissinger was a man of great accomplishment and controversy. But as he once told NBC's Barbara Walters, he had no regrets.
If I had to do it over again, I would do again substantially the same way, which may make me unreconstructed, and maybe one reason why I'm at peace with myself.
Lester Holt, NBC News, New York.
Well, much more to come here on Morning News Now. Later this hour, some good news that will get drivers pumped. Gas prices are down, way down, actually. But fill up all you can. We will explain what's behind the drop and why it might not last much longer.
Up first, after the break, the renewed war of words between Canada and India over a plot to kill a Sikh activist here in the U.S. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. The Department of Justice is revealing startling new details about an assassination plot allegedly linked to the Indian government.
According to an unsealed indictment, the Department of Justice arrested a suspect who prosecutors say was hired by an Indian government employee to carry out the assassination. The target of the would-be killing, a Sikh activist living here in New York who allegedly has a history of criticizing the Indian government. It doesn't stop there. Canadian officials said the June assassination of another Sikh activist in Canada may also be linked to India's government. India denies those allegations. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau had this to say about the new charges.
The news coming out of the United States further underscores what we've been talking about from the very beginning, which is that India needs to take this seriously. The Indian government needs to work with us to ensure that we're getting to the bottom of this.
NBC News Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Delaney joins us now for more on this. Hey, Ken, good morning. So walk us through the details we've got here so far of this indictment.
Good morning, Savannah. I think the most important detail is that the indictment suggests that the Canadian and the New York plots are, in fact, linked. These were two Sikh activists who knew one another. They both advocate for a Sikh homeland within a part of India, the state of Punjab. They are enemies, essentially, of the Indian government. And what the indictment says is that the Indian government employee who orchestrated the plot in New York and recruited the defendant in this case sent him a video of the Canadian assassination after it was completed. It also says that this defendant, an Indian national who's charged in this case, tried to pay $100,000 to a person he thought was a hitman, but ended up being an undercover U.S. law enforcement officer. That's how the plot in New York was in fact disrupted. But the most alarming thing about it is that it was orchestrated, according to this indictment, by a person who the U.S. knows is an Indian government employee based in India and who described himself as essentially a senior intelligence operative. Now, we can presume the U.S. has more information about this person, but they carefully framed it in terms of what this person told the defendant who he was recruiting to orchestrate this plot. But big picture here, the U.S. is alarmed about this because it appears to show that a friendly government, a government they're trying to woo, was trying to essentially take out two of its enemies in the U.S. and Canada. Guys.
So, Ken, the Indian government official who allegedly hired the suspect, not charged, not identified by name in the indictment. Do we know why that is?
There could be a number of reasons for that, Joe. One, the investigation is continuing. But two, the U.S. and Canada are pressing India to actually investigate this and move the wheels of justice in India against Indian residents and officials. That's kind of where this thing is moving. The U.S. certainly knows more than it's saying in these court papers about this case, but they're walking a careful line here. They don't want to embarrass the Indian government, Joe.
So tell us about the Indian government's response on this.
Yeah, Savannah, it's interesting. Initially, they denied when the Canadian Prime Minister asserted that they were behind that plot in Canada. Yesterday, they issued a statement that was more careful, that neither confirmed nor denied any assassination plot, and said that they would look into it. You know, separately, the CIA director and the National Security Advisor and others have been pressing the Indian government, even President Biden himself during the G20 in September, to look into this and take it seriously. And what we're told is that privately, Indian officials have said, oh, yes, of course, we're going to look into this. But if, in fact, it was an Indian government plot, it's a little bit of a game that everyone is playing. The U.S. wants to send a message, essentially, to India to cut it out.
All right, Ken, thank you so much. Let's stay on international headlines now, starting with choice words for the U.S. from the sister of Kim Jong-un over North Korea's recent satellite launch.
NBC News foreign correspondent Megan Fitzgerald joins us with that and other world news. Megan, good morning.
Guys, good morning to you. That's right. We start in North Korea, where the powerful sister of Kim Jong-un dismissed U.S. calls for a return to diplomacy. She also criticized recent comments made by the U.S. Condemning North Korea's launch of the spy satellite. Now, those comments coming from U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas Greenfield. She called the launch reckless and unlawful. North Korea says more launches of spy satellites will come. And turning to Rome, where the Vatican says Pope Francis is still unwell. They say he's having trouble breathing as a result of a lung inflammation. His illness forcing him to cancel his trip to Dubai for the climate conference. The Vatican says he's on antibiotics. Now, the pontiff, who is turning 87 next month, is gearing up for one of the busiest times of year, leading up to Christmas. And guys, we have some panda news to tell you about. After spending 12 years at the Edinburgh Zoo as the only pandas in the UK, Panda Sweetie and Sunshine, as they're affectionately called, are heading home back to China. But here's the thing, the hope was that they would have had some offspring. I mean, of course, who doesn't love baby pandas? But after several attempts with artificial insemination, it didn't work. So now the pandas are heading back home to China. Guys.
Panda's picking up a lot of airline miles these days, flying around the world.
Yeah. Megan, thanks so much.
Coming up, a warning for parents about a popular product for babies, why safety advocates are pushing to redesign all infant loungers on the market.
Plus, a canine lover's conundrum. If there was a way to keep your dog alive for 1 year longer, would you do it? We'll tell you about a new drug that could give you more time after the break. We are back with a major consumer alert for parents looking to purchase infant loungers. A new proposal to significantly redesign nearly all loungers on the market has been approved by the Consumer Product Safety Commission. NBC News correspondent Ann Thompson breaks down what parents need to know about the new requirements.
After years of concern about infant loungers and support pillows, the Consumer Product Safety Commission now wants them redesigned.
The problem with these products is that babies are dying in them, and they shouldn't be.
The CPSC proposing the first ever standards for the pillowy products linked to at least 79 infant deaths since 2010. More than 80% of those deaths involved infants 3 months and younger. The government says these items should be firmer, flatter, and thinner to prevent suffocation.
As long as these things exist, you can't rule out people using them for sleep.
Earlier this year, an NBC News analysis found more than twice as many deaths as the CPSC originally cited. In May, we met Kate and Brandon Movitz. Their 10-week-old son, Pierce, died after his breathing was constricted while he slept in a lounger. Now they've started the Pierced Forever Foundation to help other families.
People need to be educated on, the risks that they're taking.
With millions of products out there, CPSC Commissioner Rich Trumka says education is crucial because the new standards may not take effect for 18 months. What do parents do with the ones that are currently on the market?
I wouldn't have them in my home. And certainly, if you do have them in your home, don't use them for sleep.
The Manufacturers Industry Group says it shares the CPSC's goal of ensuring products are as safe as they can be, adding parents should always follow the manufacturer's instructions and only use infant loungers for supervised awake time. Asleep or awake, the goal is to make sure babies are safe. Ann Thompson, NBC News.
If you could keep your dog alive just 1 year longer, would you? Well, one dog pharmaceutical company is betting that your answer would be yes. And they're one step closer to getting approval from the FDA to bring a drug to market that could do just that. NBC News correspondent Valerie Castro has the details.
Come on, Phil.
In a dog's world, the future is far less important than what's right under its nose. But more time with your pup, the latest goal from doggy pharma companies. Now that's intriguing for owners.
He's just an old man. He's an old soul. The more research that came out about it, I think I would be interested.
One company is making some headway. Loyal giving NBC News a letter from the FDA saying its drug meant to increase dogs' lifespans just met one of the many conditions needed on its way to market approval. Loyal's hopes that its shot every 3 to 6 months could slow the aging process in big dogs over 40 pounds that typically have shorter lifespans, giving you possibly an extra year of cuddles, fetch, and slobbery kisses.
It compensates for what we believe drives that big dog short lifespan post-maturity.
Celine Haliwa, founder and CEO of Loyal, says the drug lowers the production and release of proteins called growth factors to slow down aging, but they won't make your big dogs smaller.
They're still going to be big. We're not creating medium Danes or anything.
The road to getting the drugs into paws across the country is a long one. Loyal still needs to do more research, show its drug actually increases a dog's lifespan, and provide more safety and manufacturing data for the FDA to vet. The FDA declined to provide a statement on the drug, saying it couldn't comment on applications in progress. And Loyal's not alone. Other researchers are hot on the trail to sniff out their own version. The Dog Aging Project is looking into the drug rapamycin.
rapamycin in the laboratory has been shown to increase healthy lifespan in mice and worms and flies. And we're interested in whether it can increase healthy lifespan in dogs.
Whether or whenever these drugs go to market, there'll be plenty of owners whose ears perk up at the idea.
I would consider, depending on, what kind of clinical trials have they done.
Others less sure about a first-of-its-kind medication.
You can't know if the dog would want to. I would feel uncomfortable about doing that.
One bioethicist echoing concerns, saying drugs like these are taking the eye off the ball.
If you think about golden retrievers, those dogs have lowered their lifespan over the past years because of breeding for particular traits. There's so much more that we could do to improve dogs' lives.
The desire to keep a dog alive longer mirrors goals we have for our own species, with researchers working on drugs that could extend human life expectancy by years or even decades.
If you ask me, do I want to live longer, I would say yes.
For now, the focus is on more tail wagging, though it's up in the air when Tilly and Ozzy and Yeti's time will be up. Eventually, all dogs go to heaven.
Thanks to Valerie Castro for that report. It is important to note this drug won't be available at your vet anytime soon. There's still a lot of regulatory hurdles and clinical trials that it will have to pass. There's some hope that there could be a conditional approval by 2026.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's one of those things where you're like, the future. What? All right, coming up, Christmas came early for drivers. Gas prices are down, way down compared to this time last year.
Our friend Caleb Silver is in studio with us this morning. He's going to explain what's behind the drop, cha-ching, why it may not last very long. Stay with us. This is Morning News Now.
Welcome back. Americans are finally seeing some relief at the gas pump. According to AAA, the cost of gas is down 30 cents compared to this time last year. But how long will those prices last? NBC News correspondent Tom Costello has what you need to know before you gas up.
From the Lone Star State to highways across the country, finally some inflation relief at the gas pump.
A lot better than last year.
It's all about supply and demand. Demand usually falls during colder months when people stay home. And right now, there's plenty of supply, with the U.S. making up 80% of the global increase.
The U.S. retains the crown of the world's largest oil producer. Oil production in the U.S. is back at record-setting levels.
On the global market, oil is now selling for $77 a barrel, down from $123 in June of last year. At the pump, gas has dropped to $3.22 a gallon nationally, 28 cents cheaper than last year. 16 states are now paying $3 or less. 25,000 gas stations at $2.75 or less, though higher taxes means gas can be $2 more expensive out west. Still, cheaper gas is one reason why car dealers report electric vehicle sales have fallen sharply. In Wisconsin, Cunis Automotive owns 44 dealerships across the region.
We've definitely seen a slowdown in electric vehicle sales across the Midwest, when we're actually seeing a lot of defectors from electric vehicles as they move back towards a ICE or hybrid vehicle.
A top customer concern, driving long distances and finding charging stations. Where gas prices go from here could depend on whether OPEC cuts production this week. OPEC doesn't have the influence it once did, but it could determine whether America's national average falls below $3 by Christmas. Also, there is news about the UAW now moving to unionize non-union automakers. Right after earning their fresh 25% pay hike from the Big Three, the UAW now says it's launching a campaign to organize 13 non-union automakers, including Tesla, BMW, Mercedes, Honda, Nissan, Toyota, Volkswagen. 150,000 auto workers in all. Back to you.
All right, Tom Costello, thank you.
Let's bring in Investopedia editor-in-chief Caleb Silver with more on all this. So Tom touched on a little bit, but what are some of the reasons we're seeing these price drops here?
Yeah, so it is winter, lower demand, but also we switched to a cheaper blend of gasoline during the winter months. So that's got a big factor on that as well. But also we've just seen that there's more oil supply. Tom alluded to it. The U.S. is now accounting for 80% of the additional supply. We heard earlier this morning that OPEC and OPEC Plus plan to cut an additional 1 million barrels. So try to drive the price up. So prices are coming down, and it's a big factor in driving down overall inflation. Nothing is more important than gas prices psychologically to the consumer.
Yeah, that is the thing people notice. So we're seeing a global, drop in demand. That can sometimes signal an economic slowdown. Do we think that's the case here?
A little bit, and you especially hear it out of China right now, which economy is slowing a little bit. The U.S. economy not slowing at all. We got a GDP update yesterday, 5+%. So not here in the United States, but around the world, we are seeing some slowdown. The fact is, too much supply, less use, that drives the price down, plus the winter months. It's a big deal for consumers.
So what can we expect with prices in the coming months?
Prices will probably stabilize here, maybe come down a little bit. But if you're in Texas or Mississippi, you're paying $2.75 a gallon. Out on the West Coast, obviously, a little bit more, $2 more, in fact. But gas prices are probably going to stay around this level right now unless we see another global disruption. But so far, those disruptions have not impacted the price of oil, which is down at $77 a barrel.
And then on the West Coast, there's always that gas station that, for whatever reason, is 75 cents more than the others around it. I've never figured
They're like
that
banking
out.
on somebody's not paying attention.
Exactly.
It's most convenient.
That's for the glamorous
I have
guys.
been the person who's doing it and looks across the street like, are you serious?
Right, exactly. So, I mean, as we head into the holiday season, we know people are going to be traveling. I mean, how could these gas prices impact most Americans?
The thing is, for every dollar saved on gas, about 80 cents of that goes to discretionary spending at every income level. So if we're saving money on gas, we're spending it in other places. Where are we spending it? We're spending it at restaurants. We're spending it sometimes flying places. We're spending it on experiences. So lower gas prices usually means more consumer spending on the discretionary things, and all of that keeps the economy and GDP running pretty swiftly right now. So I would expect the economy to stabilize, especially if these gas prices stay low. This could be very good news for consumers going through the winter.
All right. We'll take it for now. All right.
Sure will.
Caleb Silver, as always, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Staying on your money, Microsoft is now getting a seat at the OpenAI table.
Yeah, there's been a lot going on here over the last week. CNBC's Silvana Henao joins us with that and more. Hey, Silvana, good morning.
Hey, Savannah. Hey, Joe. Good morning. Yeah, so Microsoft announced it secured a non-voting board seat at OpenAI. Now, the move eases fears about the company's role with the startup after a shaky month that saw the board fire, then rehire CEO Sam Altman. Microsoft declined to identify the new board member. Spirit Airlines is offering to buy out salaried employees in an effort to cut costs. Now, the budget airline is facing financial strains that it expects to continue next year. Spirit has also paused training for new pilots and flight attendants and restricted its expense budgets. JetBlue Airways is still trying to acquire Spirit, but the Justice Department sued to block the deal. The trial is scheduled to wrap in the coming days. And for the first time ever, Kraft is bringing dairy-free mac and cheese to the U.S. The company said the new recipe maintains the same consistency but replaces dairy with ingredients like fava bean protein and coconut oil powder. The new plant-based alternative will be available in stores over the next few months. I wonder how the taste will be.
I know.
I grew up eating that
big
stuff.
Kraft mac and cheese.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I have not had it in a very long time.
I haven't either,
Honestly,
but I definitely grew up on
that. I love it. All right. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Still to come, oh, Christmas tree. One of the world's most famous Christmas trees is finally all lit up here at 30 Rock. We're going to have highlights from last night's star-studded tree lighting.
And 'tis the season to put a ring on it. That's right. A lot of people planning to get engaged this holiday season, but couples are opting for trend over tradition. When we come back, we will get an industry expert to explain. You're watching Morning News Now.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Light her up!
We are back. It is now officially Christmas time here at 30 Rock. The world-famous Rockefeller Center Christmas tree was illuminated last night. The 80-foot tree dazzled crowds of Christmas enthusiasts with its 50,000 multicolored LED lights, a 90-pound Swarovski crystal star sparkling at the top. Last night's tree lighting included performances from the Rockettes, Chloe Bailey, Cher, of course, the show's host Kelly Clarkson, and so many more. If you want to take selfies at the iconic Christmas tree in person, it will be lit every day until January 13th from 5 a.m. to midnight, except Christmas Day. That day it's lit for 24 hours, and then on New Year's Eve, from 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. because the tree takes New Year's Eve off, I guess.
Yeah,
So.
I guess so. We love it. We are lucky enough that when we come in the morning and it's still dark, and since it's lit at 5 a.m., there it is. We get to see it right out the
literally had
windows.
our families in our offices last night staring at the tree being lit.
We were here. We saw that moment, but now every morning we get a little lighting. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, of course we had to be here. We're going to end this hour with new trends when it comes to engagement. You know, when someone pops a big question.
Yeah, a growing number of couples are redefining how they approach their engagements, marking a big change in decades of tradition.
Let's bring in Kat McCoy for more on this. She is the founder of Proposal Prep. Kat, good morning. Good to have you with us. This is such a fun topic. So I know there's a growing trend of both partners kind of participating, right, in the engagement planning in various different stages. Tell us what it is that you're seeing.
Absolutely. When it comes to the timing of the engagement and the style of the ring, people are discussing much more, and sort of both parties have a seat at the table.
So does it mean that there's no element of surprise anymore, or are couples still able to keep that?
There's absolutely a spectrum of surprise. On the one hand, you have some brides-to-be who are planning every detail down to when they'd like to be proposed to.
Wow.
And then there are other people who are looking for a little bit more mystery and romance. But I think when it comes to both the ring and the proposal, there's a lot of areas where you can collaborate but still leave a little bit of mystery.
Is this like a social media thing? Is that part of the reason why, or...?
Absolutely. We live in such a visual time, and there's some expectation that whether it be within minutes or hours or, you know, sometimes even days, the ring will be posted and there will be a photo of you guys online.
So you have right here the Proposal Prep Box, which is meant to help couples begin the conversation around a possible engagement. I mean, what are some of the things couples should be thinking about as they approach this? Apparently together, talking about it, planning it.
I think one of the first things you want to talk about is the amount of input or involvement in the ring you're looking to have. I think it's always really helpful to see different diamond shapes on your own finger. So lots of couples will go shopping together in person and then decide, okay, I'm going to exit the process now. It's up to you. In terms of timing of the proposal, there are venue considerations. So if you know you want to lock in a certain venue, you may suggest, hey, it'd be great if you proposed by the end of the year. You know, the two big things really are going to be timing of the proposal, of course, and style of the ring, but there's lots of different elements, of course, as well.
I'm going to leave you now. It's up to you.
Yeah.
But that one.
Yeah, right. The ring, for sure, I think, especially if it's something you're going to wear forever, hopefully, the involvement I see, or like having best friends, or my sister was kind of involved in mine. I didn't say very much, but I just think the surprise element of being proposed to. I mean, I figured it out. I will say, love you, honey, but I did. But I wouldn't.
You were like, I think I'm going to get proposed to.
I think I'm off, and I think I will come back engaged. I just joked. But I wouldn't have necessarily wanted to like be so involved. So I like that you say that there's this spectrum of surprise, right? What's the cost like these days of rings?
The average engagement ring in the United States is around $6,000. But with everything, there is a tremendous range of what people can spend.
And I mean, we should keep in mind with LGBTQ couples, we're seeing sometimes watches or other things, right, that are part of like the engagement process.
Yes, an engagement watch has become a really big thing. Both parties proposing to each other is becoming more popular. But it's endlessly fascinating to me. It's the last rite of passage that same-sex couples, heterosexual couples, everyone seems to really abide by.
Absolutely. And what type of stuff comes in the box?
So the Proposal Prep Box is designed to help you figure out what kind of ring you want. It's got diamond buying education and also couples activities to kind of break the ice. I think every home should have a ring sizer, so that's an easy place to start. Probably the coolest part of the box is this diamond try-on kit. It comes with the 9 most popular diamond shapes. They're cubic zirconia, of course.
I was like, what do you mean?
But a really cool tool to see what each shape looks like on your finger.
Wow, let me see.
Yeah, so this would be what a round stone would look like on you.
And if someone gives you just that, you should know you should not marry them.
Major red flag.
There we go. Oh, this is so fun. Thank you so much, Kate. It's great to have you here.
Thank you.
Engagement season.
That's going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now.
But the news continues right now. Stay with us. Good morning. Thanks for joining us this Thursday. I'm Savannah Sellers.
I'm Joe Fryer. Right now on Morning News Now, the fragile ceasefire in the Middle East extended for another day as more hostages and Palestinian prisoners are released. Among them, the second American citizen freed from Gaza since the truce began. It's all playing out as violence descends on Jerusalem. Israeli officials say at least 3 people were killed in a bus stop shooting earlier this morning. We've got full team coverage. In Washington, a moment of truth for embattled Congressman George Santos. He is expected to face an expulsion vote in the House tomorrow. We've got his latest take on it all in just a moment. Also this morning, we are remembering Henry Kissinger, a titan of American diplomacy who played a major role in molding America's Cold War strategy on the world stage. Dead now at 100. We're going to take a look back at a career both revered and reviled. And we're going to end this hour with a bit of retail therapy this holiday season, how you can make those wildly popular buy now, pay later options work for you. Shopping is on everyone's mind right now.
Yes, and hopefully don't get yourself into too much trouble with plans like that. We'll give you some tips.
Exactly. We're going to begin this hour in the Middle East, where a truce between Israel and Hamas was extended overnight.
But the last-minute deal prolongs the ceasefire by just one day, raising fears of a renewed Israeli assault on the already devastated Gaza Strip in the coming days. It comes after more hostages were released yesterday, including an American citizen. NBC's chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel has the latest.
In the last minute, Israel and Hamas agreed to extend their ceasefire by only one day, which is less than negotiators had been hoping. And there are concerns that this truce could be breaking down. Another American citizen this morning is free. Liat Benin, a mother of 3, released by Hamas overnight. She's a guide at Israel's Holocaust Memorial, kidnapped during Hamas's October 7th massacre that killed 1,200 people. Her husband remains a hostage.
She was in good spirits, and she was happy to see us. She missed us.
But what little momentum was building between Israel and Hamas to de-escalate this crisis is slowing down. Israel is frustrated by Hamas's lack of clarity on the hostages, including the Bibas family, Shiri and her 2 children, 4-year-old Ariel and Kafir. At 10 months, the youngest hostage, taken on October 7th and becoming a national symbol of the horror. Now Hamas claims they were killed by a previous Israeli airstrike. The Israeli military said it's working to confirm that report. Tensions are rising. In Jerusalem this morning, 2 Palestinian gunmen, described by Israeli police as brothers from East Jerusalem, opened fire and killed 3 Israelis, including a 24-year-old woman and a 73-year-old man. 3 others are in serious condition. Hamas claimed responsibility. And in the West Bank, Israeli troops killed 2 Palestinian boys during a raid in Jenin. Israel claims they were throwing explosives. Palestinians say the killings were unprovoked. Turning off the ceasefire has costs. For Gaza, where the Hamas-run health ministry says around 15,000 people have already been killed, and for Israel, potentially stopping the release of more hostages. Yahel and Nave were among 6 members of the Haran Avigdori family Hamas freed last weekend. Their father remains in Gaza. Nave is 8 and a soccer fan. Yahel is 3 and has a big smile, but now only speaks in a whisper after being told by Hamas to stay quiet for 50 days, according to her relative, Shira Hebron.
What has it been like for you and all the families each day waiting by the phone?
It's been a nightmare. We have some air in our lungs finally because 6 of them have returned.
Secretary Blinken is once again in Israel to try and extend this ceasefire and pressure Israel to do more to avoid civilian casualties if or when it resumes its military campaign against Hamas in Gaza.
All right, Richard, thank you so much. Well, now to Washington, where there's growing pressure this morning to expel New York Congressman George Santos from Congress.
The House is expected to vote as early as Friday on a resolution to remove Santos. He's accused of misusing campaign funds and violating federal law, allegations that Santos has denied. If removed, he would be only the 6th member to ever be expelled from the House.
NBC News senior Capitol Hill correspondent Garrett Hake joins us with the latest here. Hey, Garrett, good morning. So what is the mood on Capitol Hill this morning ahead of the vote? What's the latest on where lawmakers, including, of course, House Speaker Mike Johnson, stand on expelling Santos? Any idea what to expect here with the vote?
Oh, well, Savannah, Santos is enjoying his last moment in the limelight. He's holding a press conference as we speak right now, decrying what he says is an unfair process, that he would be kicked out without having been convicted of anything, which would set an historical precedent in the House. But most members are just ready for the George Santos show to be over. We heard from a number of Republicans yesterday who feel like Santos has had every opportunity to either clear his name or do what they see as the right thing and resign, and basically that this has forced their hands into having this vote to try to get rid of somebody who's basically embarrassed their party since the moment he got here. Now, as for the Speaker, he said yesterday he was concerned about this idea of setting a precedent of kicking somebody out of Congress without an actual conviction, basically just doing it on the accusations themselves, but that he's encouraged members to vote their conscience. Again, from the members I've spoken to and our team has spoken to, their conscience says, let's get rid of this guy. He's making all of us look bad.
I mean, so Garrett, Santos has been plagued with scandals ever since he was elected just over a year ago. We know there have been plenty of efforts and thoughts about removing him previously. Does it seem like that scathing House Ethics Committee report this month seemed to be the thing that really moved the needle?
Yeah, look, this will be the third expulsion vote that Santos has faced. So you saw the first one when it was kind of just the stories and the New York Times who broke the first news about him basically fabricating his whole background. Then you saw another set of effort to expel him that popped up after he was indicted, first on 10 charges, then on another 13 federal charges related to how he ran his campaign. But the ethics report is Congress's own internal watchdog, and the report is incredibly damning. It's got him spending campaign funds at Ferragamo and Hermes on his credit card bills, even on OnlyFans. I think a lot of members looked at that from their own internal watchdog and said, enough is enough here. This guy's just got to go.
So, Garrett, let's talk about what this means if he were to go. Republicans only hold a small majority in the House. So what impact, maybe even just in the short term at least, before any type of special election were to take place, would removing Santos have on any legislation, on work getting done in the chamber?
Yeah, look, it gets a little bit smaller in the short term if you have a vacant seat for a while, and then potentially significantly smaller in the longer term because a special election in that New York congressional district would favor Democrats. It's a Joe Biden district, and a district that, frankly, Democrats weren't paying very close attention to in the midterms. They'd sure be paying attention to it now. I think a special election there would be very expensive, very closely watched, and with the margins what they are, every vote really matters in this Congress. I heard from one prominent Democrat yesterday who said, look, if Republicans had a 20-seat majority right now, Santos would have been kicked out months ago. But the fact that his vote has been so crucial has bought him and this slim majority in the Congress some time.
All right, Garrett Hake, thank you very much.
Now to the crisis along the southern border. Texas and Arizona are said to be overwhelmed with migrant encounters at the border. And now recently a number of dramatic water rescues have been caught on camera. The Texas Department of Public Safety has released this body cam footage of state troopers saving several migrant families on the Rio Grande. NBC News correspondent Morgan Chesky joins us from San Antonio with more on this. Morgan, good morning.
Joe, good morning. And our crew has seen vans bringing migrant men, women, and children to this San Antonio shelter all night long. This shelter serving as kind of a snapshot at what's happening all over the country, because if they can't get in and this shelter is at capacity, they're often forced to find anything they can huddle under for shelter and warmth until they have a chance to get much needed food, water, and a roof over their heads. Authorities are calling this a migrational shift, and it's now impacting states nationwide.
You got it, you got it, you got it.
A race to save lives on the Rio Grande. Texas state troopers pulling an unconscious migrant mother and her frightened kids to safety. The Marine unit confirming everyone here survived. But each encounter adding to what officials are calling a shift in migration trends. At San Antonio's Migrant Resource Center, officials say they've been at or over capacity for months. When the shelter opened, how many people were you planning for?
Maybe we made the plans for 700 people a day.
And now?
We have now 1,000 people on average at all times here.
Many asylum seekers here waiting to get into the country, but also missing their families back home. Mom Yaris Castillo telling me it's hard to leave your mom and dad and your siblings, admitting she cried a lot on the dangerous 4-month journey from Venezuela. Today, her family facing an uncertain future. Official migrant encounter numbers aren't in yet for November, but they've risen so much. This week, Customs and Border Protection says they're redirecting resources in Texas and Arizona to, quote, assist the U.S. Border Patrol with taking migrants into custody. The crisis along the southern border is also impacting cities nationwide. New York City Mayor Eric Adams says up to 3,000 migrants are pouring into the city each week.
This is the number one issue that's facing the city right now.
And in a city that's already seen frigid temperatures, Chicago is setting up shelters and camps to deal with what the Illinois governor is calling a humanitarian crisis.
Winter is here. We want to make sure they have someplace to go.
In Washington, lawmakers are hoping to strike a deal on the border. But so far, Republicans and Democrats have been unable to reach any agreement.
It's been 37 years since there's been comprehensive immigration reform. And in that time, we've not seen the progress that we want, deserve, or need.
And in response to what's happening in Washington, Texas Governor Greg Abbott posted online yesterday saying that until President Biden secures the southern border, the state of Texas will continue busing migrants to sanctuary cities. Joe?
All right, Morgan, thank you so much.
Well, fresh off the busy holiday travel weekend, there's new data from AAA that looks at safety on our nation's roadways. They found, among other things, that more than half of motorists admitted to doing something dangerous while driving. NBC News correspondent Tom Costello has more.
Savannah, good morning. This is I-270 in Maryland. This is a major thoroughfare, very busy. We had a horrific accident here last month. A police officer suffered devastating injuries trying to stop a speeder who was going double the speed limit. Speed nationwide has become a major problem, and it can have, as you know, devastating and deadly consequences. For drivers out here, things can go catastrophically wrong in a matter of seconds. And this morning, new figures suggest we have a long road to travel when it comes to making the streets even safer, with more than half of all drivers in a new AAA survey admitting they engage in bad behavior behind the wheel.
It's unfortunate because I think that we do things behind the wheel of our car that we wouldn't do in line at a grocery store, and lives are at stake when we're on the road.
The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration says more than 19,000 people have been killed on the nation's roads just in the first half of this year. An alarming rate despite improvements over the last year and a half. And the most recent data shows speed contributes to about a third of traffic fatalities.
Speed is the biggest factor that we see that leads to crashes. When you throw in a lot of folks behind the wheel distracted, whether it's with other passengers in the car or a cell phone, that's really a combination that's going to lead to some bad things and some careless things happening.
Pennsylvania State Police say troopers issued more than 10,000 speeding citations over the recent Thanksgiving travel period. That's up 14% from the year before. While in Maryland,
Whiskey 10, I got hit. I need fire rescue.
A Montgomery County police officer had to have both legs amputated after authorities say a teenager allegedly doing donuts and driving twice the speed limit intentionally hit the officer when he tried to stop him. AAA says while speeding is the most common behavior drivers admit to, about a third also say they've driven distracted or aggressively.
These are behaviors that most people wouldn't admit to a friend or a neighbor, but we're willing to admit in this anonymous survey, which means that they're almost certainly underestimates of really risky, dangerous, potentially life-altering behaviors.
Okay, be honest. Everybody has been tempted to text or look at your phone while driving. But if you do that, you're taking your eyes off of the highway for 5 seconds on a 55-mile-per-hour road. That's the equivalent of going the length of a football field blind with your eyes shut. All the more reason, say experts, to absolutely eliminate the distractions and slow down. Savannah, back to you.
Good way to put it, Tom. Thank you so much.
Time now for your morning News Now forecast with NBC meteorologist Michelle Grossman.
That's right. Hello, Michelle. Good morning.
Hello there, guys. Yeah, we're looking at a couple spots where we're looking at some snow, some showers, some really gusty winds, and the chance for severe storms. Let's take a look at today. We'll start out west because we have an atmospheric river event. That's pretty much a river in the sky bringing lots of moisture on shore. We've seen it week after week for the past month and a half or two. And we're seeing that once again this week. And this is going to last a few days. So it's going to bring some really high elevation snow, 1 to 2 feet in some spots, and cold coastal rain. It will be heavy at times, and it will last for days. Then we're looking at some snow, some rain in the Four Corners. Once again, that's going to last a couple days, too. And then down to the southern plains, we are concerned for severe storms. We haven't seen severe storms in this area since like January. So this is going to be, we're looking at that. Temperatures warming up a bit. It's going to pull the moisture off the Gulf, and that's going to spark some storms. We even saw a few thunderstorms early this morning. We're seeing the scattered showers there. Milder highs in the northeast and mid-Atlantic. So we're starting to moderate, which is nice. Now, as we go throughout tomorrow, we are looking at that Pacific storm really taking hold. Still seeing that heavy rain along the coast. We're looking at Intermountain West snow as well into the Rockies, the Four Corners once again. And then look at all that rain on a Friday. The Drury East Coast, that rain stretching from New England to the Mid-Atlantic, the Ohio Valley, parts of the Tennessee Valley, and also the Mississippi Valley. And then we're also looking at Midwest snow as well. So a lot of us seeing some wet weather tomorrow. That's going to be the same story on Saturday. We're going to dry it out for the most part in parts of the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic. We're going to keep it wet. Heavy rain throughout portions of the Tennessee Valley, the lower Mississippi Valley, and then back to the west, we're looking at heavy snow once again in the Intermountain West. This is still due to the atmospheric river, and you can see that heavy rain still falling along the coast. So we're going to watch that closely, again, watching closely the severe weather threat today. And then by Sunday, another storm moving onshore in the Pacific Northwest. No showers in the Intermountain West. More rain likely throughout New England, the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic, down to the Southeast, and also parts of the Great Lakes could see some snow. This is what radar looks like right now. We are looking at some thunderstorms in the Four Corners right now, looking at a few lightning strikes, too, in the southern plains. You can see a little bit of green moving onshore into portions of the Pacific Northwest. That's the start of the atmospheric river that's going to take hold over the next few days. 7 million people at risk today. We're watching the chance for tornadoes. Some could be on the strong side, especially in the Houston area. Also looking at some really gusty winds and locally heavy downpours. That's going to lead to some flash flooding.
Oh, all right. So much rain. Michelle, thank you so much.
Sure.
Now to the passing of a monumental and controversial figure in American diplomacy. Former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger died Wednesday at the age of 100. NBC News Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent Andrea Mitchell takes a look back at his remarkable life.
Henry Kissinger served Presidents Richard Nixon and Gerald Ford and was widely credited with shaping the nation's Cold War policy and opening the first doors with China. But the Nobel Prize winner was also heavily criticized for his actions during the Vietnam War. He'd come to America at the age of 15, his family escaping the Holocaust. He rose to the highest levels of American statesmanship and continued to advise presidents of both parties for decades after leaving office. This morning, Henry Kissinger is being remembered as a towering figure in American diplomacy.
I think we made further progress.
Brilliant and controversial, the former Secretary of State reshaped U.S. foreign policy under Presidents Nixon and Ford. With Nixon, he helped ease tensions with the Soviet Union and conducted secret negotiations with China, spearheading Nixon's historic trip to China in 1972. He also negotiated an end to the Vietnam War, but declared success prematurely, just days before the 1972 election.
We believe that peace is at hand.
Those negotiations won him the Nobel Peace Prize. But Kissinger had legions of critics, some calling him a war criminal for bombing Cambodia and prolonging the Vietnam War. Born in Germany in 1923, Kissinger's Jewish family fled the Nazis in 1938. He attended public schools in New York City, returned to Germany with the U.S. Army in World War II, and later earned a Ph.D. at Harvard, where he became a professor. Attracting the attention of President Nixon, Kissinger first became his national security advisor, then Secretary of State, the only person to ever hold both jobs at the same time.
There is no country in the world where it is conceivable that a man of my origins could be standing here next to the President of the United States.
Kissinger's influence and charm made him an unlikely celebrity. He met the love of his life, marrying his wife Nancy, a top aide to then Vice President Nelson Rockefeller. After leaving government, Kissinger traveled the world, advising heads of state and counseling U.S. presidents of both parties. He celebrated his 100th birthday in May before returning to China, the scene of his greatest diplomatic triumph, where he received a red carpet welcome from President Xi Jinping. His greatest achievement was certainly his opening to China, which transformed the global landscape so that the U.S. and China, not Russia, are now the world's two great economic and technological superpowers. And the fact that he took that long trip to China this past July at the age of 100 is remarkable. And in his meeting with President Xi, helped lay the groundwork for President Biden's recent summit, which restored communications between the U.S. and China that had been in a dangerous freeze for the better part of a year. Kissinger was always pushing forward. In his final days, was writing and speaking about artificial intelligence.
All right, Andrea Mitchell, thank you so much.
We've got much more to come on this hour of Morning News Now, including what you should know this morning about Google deleting some Gmail accounts as early as tomorrow.
But first, after the break, artificial intelligence and eating disorders, why some tech experts are now sounding the alarm over a troubling new trend on ChatGPT. Those stories and more up next. Stay with us. We're back with international headlines. Japan is suspending its own Osprey flights after that deadly crash off its southern coast.
NBC News foreign correspondent Megan Fitzgerald joins us with more. Hey, Megan, good morning.
Guys, good morning to you. That's right. We start in Japan, where officials there are saying that they are, in fact, suspending the flight by its Osprey aircraft. Now, of course, this comes just one day after a U.S. Osprey based in Japan crashed during a training mission, killing at least one person. Japan has asked the U.S. to ground all Osprey, especially except for those searching for victims. And backlash in Paris ahead of the Summer Olympic Games. New plans announced by the police chief would require motorists to apply online for a QR code to access traffic-restricted areas during the games. Now, lawmakers were among those who complained, saying that they weren't consulted. The police chief says he was expecting pushback and that traffic restrictions would be kept to a minimum. And guys, a history-making moment in Nepal. Authorities there registering the nation's first same-sex marriage yesterday. This comes 5 months after the Supreme Court issued an interim order which paved the way for same-sex marriages. This is huge because aside from Taiwan, Nepal, they are just the only two nations in Asia that allow for same-sex marriages. Guys.
Megan, thank you so much. Well, as we have been talking about on this show, tech researchers have been sounding the alarm on the potential harms of artificial intelligence. Well, here's something new. A study now found the AI tools are promoting harmful eating disorder content for users. NBC News correspondent Maura Barrett tried it out for herself and found concerning results.
With a few quick input questions, generative AI can simplify the headache of planning an itinerary or schedule.
Let's try thin legs inspiration.
But researchers worry that simplicity could be dangerous based on what the user is looking to build.
They don't have the checks and balances that we'd have as human beings. So if a 12-year-old girl came up to you and said, how do I get super, super skinny, and can you teach me a diet plan that will kill me? You would say, no, are you okay? Let's talk a bit further. What these systems say is, here's a diet plan.
Researchers with the Center for Countering Digital Hate found that users on eating disorder forums were already openly embracing AI tools to produce low-calorie diet plans and images glorifying unrealistic body standards. One user even commenting, when these machines get good at making faces, I'm going to be making so much personalized thinspo. Thinspo, or thinspiration, is imagery often used by those with eating disorders as motivation.
What really scared us was how these AI tools were actually giving them encouragement to get skinnier, dangerously skinny, potentially lethally skinny.
We tested out the tech, asking for diet and fitness plans. While the bot in many cases did flag that my goals were unhealthy and recommended I speak to a healthcare professional, it still laid out some questionable content for someone who may be looking to lose weight quickly.
They give that blanket warning, but then give the advice anyway. Does that help at all?
But by then, they've already provided the person asking the question with the answer of, here's a dangerous diet plan, here's some thinspiration images. And so they're not really that effective. But quite often we found those warning messages didn't pop up at all.
As for some of the generative images, no warning was issued, but some of the images were blurred out. Because of their graphic nature, we're not showing them in full here. Both OpenAI and Google said they don't want their products to inspire self-harm and encourage users to double-check information on their platforms with a doctor, while Snapchat says it takes safety and age-appropriate content seriously.
While AI chatbots are trying to regulate harmful responses, the Center for Countering Digital Hate actually found that people can use a simple jailbreak prompt to circumvent those restrictions and get dangerous results.
The CCDH found that popular AI chatbots like Snapchat, ChatGPT, and Google's Bard produced harmful harmful results 41% of the time, even without a jailbreak prompt, a command that removes restrictions put in place by the platforms. When the prompt was introduced, that number rose to 67% of results containing pro-eating disorder material.
Hello and welcome back to my channel.
Ro Mitchell is an eating disorder survivor. She shared her journey recovering from anorexia on YouTube and Instagram.
And I thought a fun idea for a video would be letting AI choose what I eat in a day. And when it gave me the meal plan that it gave me for the day, it was, first of all, not a lot of food. But second of all, none of the meals had carbs in it.
She says if these tools were available when she was still in the midst of her anorexia or even in early recovery, it would have easily set her back.
If you were searching thinspo and you see an image of somebody that is even more underweight than you or just dangerously underweight, you're going to tell yourself, oh, I'm not actually skinny enough. I'm not actually unwell enough. I can do better. I can get worse.
The issue of body image in girls is nothing new. A study by the Journal of Pediatric Psychology shows 35 to 57% of adolescent girls engage in crash dieting, fasting, self-induced vomiting, diet pills, or laxatives. Now, users are met with a blank search section and a message saying Instagram wants to be sensitive about body image and then shares resources. It's since updated its policy to include generative AI. But for young people, that might not be enough.
It's going to be really easy to figure out the right prompts to get around anything AI says. That is true for anyone. You add in the secrecy with anorexia and you kind of have a recipe for disaster, really.
At the end of the day, experts say the onus is on the platforms themselves.
And so what do tech companies need to put in place to make sure that when their systems are aggregating this information that's online, that it gets produced in a safer way?
So there's two things that we need here. First of all, it's curation. So you need to curate the information that goes into these systems. Secondly, have guardrails and make sure that those are in place before you launch them.
Our thanks to Mara Barrett for that important reporting there. Well, coming up, it's an NBA shakeup with a billionaire businessman at the center of it all.
After the break, we're going to dig deeper into Mark Cuban's surprise deal to sell his majority share in the Dallas Mavericks. What's behind his decision? That's up next. This is Morning News Now. We're back with a closer look at an incredible story of survival from more than 40 years ago.
Yeah, a plane carrying a rugby team from Uruguay crashed in the Andes Mountains. 16 people managed to survive 72 agonizing days in some brutal conditions. NBC News Now anchor Tom Yamas has more.
Tonight, we have film of what very nearly amounts to a real miracle. Survivors of a plane crash in the Chilean Andes. The plane went down 10 weeks ago. The 45 people aboard were given up for dead.
When the news broke in 1972, the world couldn't believe it.
Some were injured or suffering from exposure and had to be carried out on stretchers.
Others walked right off the rescue choppers to smiles, hugs, and so many questions. How did 16 young men survive a plane crash and more than 2 months stranded in the mountains, surrounded by snow, with nothing to eat? A new Netflix film, Society of the Snow, revisits the terrifying and later grim events. Starting with the crash that tore off the plane's tail and wings.
What do you remember about the crash?
About the crash, I thought I was going to die.
Roberto Canessa was just 19 years old when he and his rugby team boarded that doomed flight to Chile.
Was it hard to watch the movie?
Yeah, because I was like immersed in that place again. I was back to the fuselage.
Though films like Alive from 1993 have told this story before, Roberto says never like this. The viewers are transported to the actual site of the crash. The production actually setting up a base camp. Everyone living in those extreme conditions.
We were shooting at 12,000 feet, exactly in the same place where the plane crashed at the same time of the year.
Director J.A. Bayona and star Enzo Vogrinsic told me the cast and crew also relied on these photos from the actual disaster from a camera the survivors had found on board.
Every time you see one of those pictures, you think about who were they, what happened to them.
In building his character, Vogrinsic lost 50 pounds, eating just a can of tuna and a tangerine a day. Vogrinsic tells me the fasting and the on-location shoots helped him understand the decisions the survivors had to make, including eating the flesh of the passengers who had died.
Talk to me about the moment that you guys decided as a group that you're going to have to eat your loved ones, your teammates, your friends. What was that like?
I thought if I would die, I would be proud and my body would be used for someone else.
In the ultimate act of selflessness, Roberto eventually hiked out of the mountain range with teammate Nando Parrado and announcing to the world they were alive. That teenage hero grew up to become a renowned pediatric cardiologist who says the time in the mountains took so much away from him, but also gave him something he keeps forever.
About how to overcome difficulties in life and to have faith in yourself.
That's putting it mildly. My goodness, our thanks to Tom Yamas for that extraordinary story.
Absolutely. All right, well, there's a shakeup going on this morning in the ownership ranks of the NBA.
In an unexpected move, Dallas Mavericks owner Mark Cuban has agreed to sell the majority of his stake in the team. The family of Miriam Adelson, the widow of the GOP donor and casino magnate Sheldon Adelson, they're the prospective buyers of the team. According to a statement released by the NBA, the Adelsons have already entered into binding purchase agreements with Cuban to acquire majority ownership of the team.
Mike Vorkunov joins us now. He's the national basketball business reporter at The Athletic. Thank you very much for being with us. So tell us, what do we know about Cuban's deal here with these prospective buyers, and how much of a surprise was this?
Well, it's really surprising. Probably one of the more shocking NBA transactions of the last few years, and the details are still emerging. But I think what we can kind of whittle it down to at this point is that Mark Cuban is selling a majority stake of the Mavericks to the Adelson family for somewhere around $3.5 billion, which is a lot of money, but also is not as much probably by valuation as the Mavericks might be worth. And certainly one of the few teams, a few NBA teams in the last few years in which the valuations haven't continue to go up. And the interesting part of the deal is that as of the reporting so far, it seems like Mark Cuban will retain control of basketball operations, but it won't be his team anymore. The Adelson family will have control, and they will have one of their own as the governor of the team, which will report and deal with the NBA.
I do want to ask you about that Cuban would still be head of basketball operations if this is approved. How rare is that for an owner to sell the majority share but still have so much control?
Look, it's very rare. I can't remember many times it's happened in the past. I think the only one that really comes to mind is roughly about 15 or so years ago when Michael Jordan was a minority shareholder in the then Charlotte Bobcats, but still ran basketball operations. That was a different case. He bought in as a minority owner. And of course, he's Michael Jordan, right? So maybe you get some different perks, but I can't remember an owner selling control of his team and then still remaining in control of the actual basketball operations. The difference now is it won't be his team. So we'll see how strong that hold is or how tenuous it might be.
The other thing that's kind of interesting is the timing of this, given that Cuban announced last week that he's also leaving the hit reality TV show Shark Tank next year. And now we have this news selling the stake here. There was some speculation that he was going to run for president, but he had told NBC News that he has, quote, no plans to run. But I mean, look, these are things core to his brand, core to, how he spends a lot of his time, how we see him in the public. Any hints why he would be making all these moves?
Not yet. You mentioned the Shark Tank exit. The Mavericks, and being the owner of the Mavericks, I think was really what catapulted him into this kind of fame. And now he's getting out of that to a significant degree. In recent years, he'd been running a prescription drug company, making generic drugs cheaper, cost plus drugs. He'll still be really involved in that. He's 65 now, so maybe he's just deciding to do something else with his life. As you mentioned, the presidential run, it doesn't seem like he's interested as of what he said lately. There's also the other part of it, which is a partnership with the Adelson family is something that Cuban has been interested for a few years to try to build a resort and a casino in Dallas, which would be a new home for the Mavericks as well, and maybe part of a push to legalize gambling and sports betting in Texas where it's not legal yet. So this might all be kind of a bigger play in mind for Cuban, or maybe just something else altogether.
Let's talk money here. Do we know how much of a good investment this team was for Cuban?
Well, I think he bought it for roughly $285 million 23 years ago. I'm not going to try to do math off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure he's made a lot off of this investment.
He made some good money. All right.
There we go. All right, Mike Vorkunov, thank you so much for joining us.
Coming up, Elon Musk now sounding off on that X advertising boycott in the wake of cries of alleged anti-Semitism from the billionaire.
If somebody's going to try to blackmail me with advertising, blackmail me with money, go f yourself.
We've got more on his latest response to the controversy that could cost his social media empire tens of millions. That's up next. Welcome back. In a new interview, billionaire businessman Elon Musk is once again firing back at his critics, and he did not hold back. He said he could care less what advertisers think after a number of companies pulled their business from his social media company, X, after he was accused of amplifying an anti-Semitic post. NBC News correspondent Emily Aketa joins us now with the details here. Hey, Emily, good morning.
Hey, Savannah, good morning to you. It was a long and remarkably candid interview with CNBC's Andrew Ross Sorkin that covered a wide range of topics, from unions and AI to Tesla and SpaceX. But after apologizing for his controversial comments and what he called his dumbest post yet, Musk had some very strong words for the advertisers who have since left his platform. A defiant appearance by billionaire businessman Elon Musk.
Go yourself. Is that clear?
The richest man in the world speaking out in an interview with CNBC's Andrew Ross Sorkin at the New York Times DealBook Summit amid a firestorm of criticism over his inflammatory comments on social media. Earlier this month, Musk appeared to endorse an anti-Semitic post on X that accused Jewish communities of pushing hatred against white people, writing "the actual truth," a response that unleashed a barrage of backlash from the White House to a wave of companies, including NBC's parent company Comcast, pulling their advertising from X, which reportedly could cost the social media platform up to $75 million. And Musk potentially adding fuel to the fire last night, emphatically scoffing at the advertiser boycott.
If somebody's going to try to blackmail me with advertising, blackmail me with money, go f yourself. But go f yourself. Is that clear? I hope it is. Hey, Bob.
Musk appearing to specifically call out Disney CEO Bob Iger, who was also interviewed earlier.
And by him taking the position that he took in quite a public manner, we just felt that the association with that position and Elon Musk and X was not necessarily a positive one for us.
Last night, Musk did later admit an advertising boycott could kill the company and apologize for his original inflammatory tweet, calling it likely his dumbest ever.
I'm sorry for that tweet or post. It was foolish of me. I tried my best to clarify it 6 ways to Sunday.
He also recently traveled to Israel to meet with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and toured a kibbutz ravaged in Hamas's attack. Musk insisting it was not an apology tour. And separately in the interview, Musk voiced concerns about artificial intelligence, calling for more regulation and saying the developing tech is more dangerous than nuclear bombs. He also teased ahead to Tesla's Cybertruck launch happening today after years of challenges and delays. It's been the source of strong opinions and plenty of memes, but Musk pointed out that he knows a thing or two about the market. Savannah?
All right, Emily Aketa, thank you so much.
Starting tomorrow, your unused Gmail account could be deleted by Google.
Yeah, the company put out a notice back in May and is expected to start taking action on December 1st.
With all you need to know, NBC News business and data reporter Brian Chung is here. So why is Google doing this? And this is the important question. What is considered inactive?
Yeah, well, so for what it's worth, we all have inactive accounts, but what Google is counting as inactive is anything that you haven't used in the last 2 years. So if you haven't logged in, this could potentially be an account that would be deleted. And the reason why they're doing this is because of security. So if you have an account that's not active, it's more likely to have an old password. It's more likely to not have two-step factor authentication where you have to use your cell phone to log in, for example. And it's also more vulnerable to identity theft or used for spam. So if you have sensitive information in there from emails you don't remember from a few years ago, that's the reason why they want to delete it before potentially some hacker could get in there.
So we mentioned that people knew about this since May, but how do you know, are you getting notice if you maybe have one of these accounts?
Yeah, so if you have another linked email to, let's say, for example, a Gmail account, you would get a notification in that other linked email, perhaps one that you're using more often, to say, hey, by the way, we might delete this. But I have to just kind of remind everyone here, it's not just Gmail. If you have documents in a Google Docs or a Google Drive file, if you have Meet events in a Meet calendar, or if you also have Google Photos, this is a big one. If you have photos photos that you've uploaded there that you don't remember, those could potentially be deleted as well. Wow. One thing that wouldn't be subject to this is YouTube. So if you have a YouTube account and you have videos on there, they will still remain even if you haven't logged in the past few years.
So I'm literally sitting here and thinking, okay, I do have a Gmail account that like my Hulu is tied to, but I never use it. So what if I don't want this to be deleted? I want to keep it. What can I do? Yeah, well,
you're just gonna have to show Google that you are active. So basically logging back in and then doing something as simple as reading or sending an email. You can watch a YouTube. You can do a simple Google search in your Gmail account once you log in, and then it'll be marked as an active account. It won't be deleted. With regards to what you're saying, if you're using a Gmail account and you're using that as a login for another website, for example, if you log in, that could count as a third-party interaction that would also account for you marking this as an active account.
So what if you don't use the account anymore? I know a lot of people like set up Gmails maybe just for promotional emails or something, and you just like it's just sort of almost like a junk email, but that you do have other content there, like you mentioned, photos, docs, that kind of thing, and you don't want to lose it. What can you do in that situation?
Yeah, well, and there's a lot of other people too who are like, I have 5 email accounts. I don't need this Gmail account. And if that's the case, you can choose to basically take the account down, but you can log back in one more time just to download anything that you have. There's a service called Google Takeout where you can back up your data. You can download it, export, and there's also a thing that you can do in an inactive account manager, even if you do have an active account, where you can say, let's say, for example, I don't log in for 18 months. You can say exactly how you want Google to treat your account after those 18 months, just so that Google knows, okay, we're going to do this with your data, we're going to trash it, or we're going to download it, just so that you have it available to you, even if you don't want to use that account.
Oh, I suddenly feel like I have a to-do list today.
Yeah.
Remember the password. Got to get in there. Got to send an email.
Remembering the password is like half the battle.
It's not lunch. It's
boo.
Right. Thank you, Brian. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, now for what else is making financial headlines, the United Auto Workers Union is efforting some new additions to its ranks.
CNBC's Silvana Henao has that and other money news. Silvana, good morning.
Hey, Joe. Hey, Savannah. Good morning. Yeah, so the United Auto Workers Union is looking to grow its membership by unionizing employees at 13 car manufacturers right here in the U.S. Now, the plan would add 150,000 members to the union and would involve workers at companies including Honda, BMW, and Mercedes-Benz. And the move comes just over a week after the union ratified and signed contracts at Detroit's big 3 car companies after 6 weeks of strikes. Walt Disney head Bob Iger said that he will step down from his role as CEO when his contract ends in 2026. The Disney leader also made it clear that the ABC broadcast network is not for sale even as the company undergoes mass restructuring. Iger rejoined Disney in November 2022. That's less than a year after he retired, with plans to streamline operations and cut costs. Disney is on track to exceed the $5 billion cost savings estimate it gave investors back in February. And NASCAR signed new television and streaming deals with major media partners, highlighting the growing popularity of streaming and motorsport. The partners include Amazon, Warner Brothers Discovery, and Fox, and the deals are valued at $7.7 billion. They will start in 2025 and will run through 2031, guys.
Wow, very cool.
Yeah.
All right, Silvana, thank you so much.
You got it.
Well, coming up, it's a pretty popular retail trend that's kicking into high gear now that the holidays are here.
We're talking about those buy now, pay later options at many of your favorite stores and online. It may sound enticing, but it's not without some pitfalls. So how can you make the plans work for you this holiday season? We have got some tips up next.
Welcome back. Well, this one's for all the parents. Actually, this is really for everybody, but for parents, especially those with a teen or two at home, you might have caught yourself slinging the same sort of slang they use when chatting, but we didn't even know all these on set here. According to a new survey, you're definitely not the only one. Words like bet and yeet are just a few of the terms that parents have heard, and then they actually understand them. For the uninitiated, bet actually means I agree, while yeet refers to violently throwing an object that is worthless. You know, to yeet something? Okay. According to the survey, parents have kept up with teens' ever-evolving language by Googling the words. That makes sense. It's helped them communicate a little bit better with their child. Other popular words that parents might recognize: salty, bougie, sus. You know those ones?
I don't know the last one.
Sus. It means something's like suspect. Like you are suspicious of it. That's
okay.
sus.
I got
and the
that.
other one now is riz.
Which means
that
I feel so old right now.
Well, I didn't know the ones, and you knew them, and you educated me. Riz, this one I think is so interesting. It comes from charisma, so it means like you've got riz.
Okay.
Somebody once told me, now that I'm married, I have no riz.
I feel like I would say like Cariz. Like at least.
I like that.
Cariz.
Well, hey, try to start it up.
Okay.
There you go.
Hashtag Cariz. All right. In Blockbuster opening holiday shopping season weekend, a record number of consumers use the buy now, pay later option at checkout.
Yeah, you see this everywhere now. On Cyber Monday alone, $940 million worth of sales were made using that option. That is a, get this, 42% jump year over year.
So what do you need to know before you pick and pay later? NBC News senior business correspondent Christine Romans is here with all the details.
Hi.
So remind us how this works and who is using it perhaps to their advantage.
I was really surprised how popular this was over the holiday weekend, right? And this is essentially when you're at the checkout or you're online checking out, you're offered buy now, pay later. So you'll pay in installments. It's essentially kind of like layaway, but you get the product right away, the old-fashioned layaway, but it's an interest-free loan. Essentially, you're taking out a loan the moment you're buying that product, and you're saying you're going to pay it off over 6 weeks, 8 weeks, sometimes 4 weeks, depending on what the service offers. If you pay it off every, 2 weeks, you pay that bill, there's no interest, and then you own the product free and clear. Sounds great, right? Sounds like a way to maybe outsmart higher interest rates, but you really need to be careful. When you look at the profile of who's doing this, young people who don't have access to credit cards for a reason like they have had a bankruptcy. So they're finding a way to pay for this item, and they're basically taking out a loan here.
So what happens? Okay, so let's say you're doing it. I mean, because you can literally do it for a sweater, a pair of shoes, all these different places.
Which I don't recommend, by the way.
Okay,
I think you should do it for a necessity. I think if it's a necessity or it is a must-have item on the Christmas list or the holiday list, then you should do it because you never want to go into debt for something that is not a necessity.
Right.
And we do this on credit cards already, by the way. But that's something to remember around the holidays. If you need a mattress, for example, or your teenager wants a certain kind of a sound bar or headphones, and you know you're going to be able to pay it off in that 6 weeks, then it can be some flexibility for your family budget, but be very careful about things that aren't necessities.
Okay, so don't buy a sweater, but just for argument's sake, don't do this. But if you were to buy a sweater, let's say, because you just get to take the sweater home. It's like a $100 sweater, and you're supposed to pay it off over 6 weeks. You already have the item. What happens if you don't pay it off?
So when you sign up, it's essentially you're getting a loan. So they have your bank information. They've done sort of like a soft credit check, so they know who you are and they know where to. And they're doing they're probably doing a direct payment out of your bank account every 2 weeks for that payment. Now, if for some reason you tell them, hey, I can't make the $50 payment this week or this month, they're going to give you a fine, and they're going to start racking up interest on that. It can be interest that's way higher than a regular credit card. And by the way, you're not building credit for most of these. You're not building credit, which is something that young people really want to be doing in case they need to get a car or they need to get a mortgage someday. You're not building credit. But if you screw up and you don't pay it off, it does get reported as, so you only get the bad mark, you don't get the good mark for paying it off on time. I'm just so surprised how really popular it is, and there are so many different services that are out there being offered to people. Again, if you're a paycheck-to-paycheck consumer and you really don't have either the credit card or the flexibility, the savings to be able to buy something, it does give you this flexibility, but with everything, buyer beware. Be careful. Be careful.
We have 15 seconds left here, but if you are leery about this, are there other options out there?
Well, you need to be, you could get a cash-backed credit card. You need to try to figure out how you can start building your credit. I think that's kind of the best way to go. And just remember, necessities. You don't want to go into debt for something that's not a necessity.
All right. Christine Romans, thank you so much. Good to have you here with us.
You've got Riz. Just
Cariz.
Cariz. Oops, how could I forget?
All right. That's going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now.
The news continues right now. Don't go anywhere.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.